So now you're in the big league. You're now a congressman. What really changed in your life at that point?
That's a great question. I would pinch myself because I think a lot of your viewers and your listeners know where the Congress meets. It's in Washington, D.C., in that beautiful Capitol building, right? And, I think about the early jobs I had in my life. I shined shoes when I was 9 years old. I started working since I was 9, shining shoes till I was 13, and then I had jobs delivering pizzas. I worked in different factories. I worked in a meat packing plant. I worked up in Alaska on the Alaskan pipeline. But I worked in different offices when I became a lawyer, but I never worked in a workplace like that, right? With all that history and that beautiful building and the different men and women who walked through the halls of that building. It's such a historic place. I mean, Abraham Lincoln was a United States congressman for 2 years. President Kennedy was a congressman for 6 years, and his office was in the Cannon building on the 5th floor where mine was. President Nixon was a congressman, and he and President Kennedy, as young congressmen, they were elected the same year, 1946. They were also on the 5th floor of the Cannon building where my congressional office was. So I would periodically pinch myself. I thought about my upbringing and where I came from, and, they were, somewhat humble origins. I wasn't born and raised in a log cabin, but, growing up around Cicero and Armitage in a working class neighborhood in Chicago, surrounded by factories in a 5-room apartment, and here I am suddenly sitting next to Ted Kennedy's son, Senator Kennedy's son. Patrick was a colleague of mine in the House Armed Services Committee, sitting right next to me when we'd have committee meetings. And on the other side of that committee was Congressman, the late Sonny Bono from Sonny and Cher, right? He was a Republican congressman, the former mayor of Palm Springs, a great guy, by the way. But he was a Republican on the other side, same committee as me. And then I remember the day that I was assigned to join what's called a conference committee. A handful of members of the House Armed Services Committee meet with a handful of members from the United States Senate who also sit on the Armed Services Committee, and you meet to work out the differences between the legislation that comes out of the House and comes out of the Senate. And I was fortunate because the Democratic leader, Ron Dellums, a historic figure, actually liked me, and he put me on that conference committee as a freshman. That's very unusual. But I went to my first meeting of Vlad, and it was really it was remarkable to me because I felt like, I was looking around and there's Senator Ted Kennedy, his brothers, John F. Kennedy assassinated, Robert Kennedy assassinated, the Kennedy family, the most prominent family politically in American history, probably, maybe the Kennedys, the Adamses, and the Bushes. John McCain was there in that committee. Joe Biden was a member of that committee. John Warner, who was a senator from Virginia, who was one of Elizabeth Taylor, the movie actress's husbands, like the 6th or 7th husband. I remember looking at that guy and I'm thinking to myself, holy cow, that guy had sex with Elizabeth Taylor. Now, I wasn't saying that out loud, but I couldn't help but think that, right? And then I kept thinking to myself, someone's going to realize I'm in here and they're going to kick me out. But then I had to remind myself, no, I'm a duly elected member of the United States Congress. In fact, so it was good. I learned a lot, and it was quite an experience. So you asked me a simple question, what was it like when I was a congressman? It was remarkable. And I found myself at the highest levels of government in the United States, this great country that I've been blessed to be born in, the place my father as an immigrant appreciated and loved. And then, I spent 6 years there, did different things, including visiting a war zone in 1999, Yugoslavia, when our country was at war with Yugoslavia. You may or may not remember, but there were 3 American servicemen that were taken prisoner by the Serbs. I'm Serbian. My dad came from there. And I joined the Reverend Jesse Jackson to go to Serbia during the war, a little bit like what's happening now in Ukraine, only we were bombing that country, Serbia. And in that war zone, Reverend Jackson and I met with President Milosevic of Yugoslavia and negotiated the release of those 3 soldiers. That was, of course, my best moment, my finest hour during my 6 years as congressman, when I was able to help Reverend Jackson bring those guys home. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I'm so glad we got those guys back.
Yeah, congratulations for that. That was a very big deal. I read about that as well.
Thank you, Vlad.